Okay, good morning, everyone. Please confirm that you can hear me. Maybe just type a yes on the chat box.
Morning.
Good morning.
Awesome.
Good morning, Tony.
Good morning. You're welcome. So let me be the first to say Happy New Year, right? Happy New Year in advance. In a couple of hours, we will be winding down on 2022 and entering 2023. So I think we're in a good place. We have about 39 of us here. Hopefully others will join so we can start. Okay. Indeed, 2022 has been an interesting year, challenging in some way, but has also presented some fantastic opportunities. When you look at global economies still struggling based on the aftermath of the COVID-19 pandemic, just when we thought that things were looking up, because a good number of economies have opened up, I think, except for China that had been on lockdown for a while, just when we thought that things were looking up, the Russia-Ukraine war setting, further slowing down recoveries from these economies. Severe disruption in supply chain, right? Especially when you look at the fact that China is a major manufacturing hub for the world. The tech and cyberspace has not been, has also felt they've not been spared by some of the events. So several organizations, their operations have been altered. Fresh risks, right, have either been introduced into business or amplified as a result of these global events. And so a couple of weeks ago, we put out a survey. We try to do this every year. We put out a survey to kind of identify what we tech risk folks consider to be the top 7 risks that impacted business operations in 2022, and then try and juxtapose into 2023 and say, look, is it likely that this risk may persist, which is the basis for our conversation this morning. So our agenda, if you go through the slide before, after introduction, okay, so we would look at the outcome of that survey, and then we'll have a panel discussion. Then we will then look at what that survey also threw up in terms of the kind of risks we should be looking out for in 2023. Next slide, please. Next slide. Okay. So this is the outcome of that survey. There were tons of, we put this out online, there were tons of IT risks that we had identified, and these ones came out tops. So you see people risk, you see third-party risks, you see data privacy issues, cloud, cybersecurity, weakness in IT asset inventory management, and issues around governance, poorly documented processes as the sticky issues, right, that drove our 2022. So we have 5 fantastic panelists today, right? Great folks solving tech-related problems at scale in their various organizations and industries, and we're excited to have them share their wealth of experience with us this morning. They will also be talking to us on how they have managed to deal with some of these issues that have plagued us in 2023. Like I said earlier, the idea behind our conversation today is to see how the IT risk landscape has fared this year, and then gain insights into what 2023 holds. We think this is important because it helps us to be proactive in our planning for 2023. So our first panelist is Mr. Alex Akindumila. He serves as the Group Chief Information Security Officer for a Nigerian conglomerate, right, that has interests in oil and gas, power, real estate, hospitality, healthcare, and finance. Before taking up this role, he led the IT risk department in a tier 1 bank, and he has got over 20 years of experience managing various aspects of IT. So I like to think that we are in a good place. We also have Mr. Richard Bello, who serves as the Chief Audit Executive of an electronic payment and switching company. Just to give you a sense of the kind of infrastructure he manages the risk around. In November alone, the electronic payment switching company processed over 90 billion in transactions, right? Richard has a bias for technology risk. He, before his appointment as CAE, he served as the head of IT control. He has led several IT audit teams in several institutions. He's a CISA. He's a 27001 lead auditor among several certifications he possesses. He has over 21 years of experience in tech risk management. We also have Mrs. Oluremi Bendega, who serves as the head of Information Systems Risk Assurance and Audit with a tier 1 bank as well, with international subsidiaries across Africa and the UK. She has got over 25 years of banking experience, managing various aspects of IT and digital payments. She is a CCISO, she's a CISA, and she's also an ISO 27001 lead auditor. And finally, we have Anthony Ajiboye, who is a senior manager IT GRC with a consulting firm in Canada. I think Anthony has gone through a lot of pain to be with us. I think it's probably 5 a.m. or 6 a.m. in Canada this morning. Before his current role, he has worked with one of the big 4 consulting firms as a manager technology advisory. He brings a wealth of experience providing tech risk advisory across diverse industries, manufacturing, finance, government, etc. He is also a CISA. He's certified he possesses C-Risk and PMP. My name is Tony Ayuno, and I'll be coordinating this fireside chat. Just to confirm that our panelists are around, can we just confirm that? Okay, thank you, Mr. Richard. Thank you. Is Mrs. Bendega around? Okay, fantastic. Mr. Alex, if you're around, please turn on your video if you can. Okay. Mr. Anthony, okay, thank you. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Thank you very much for your time. We really appreciate it. Okay, so I'll start with you, Mr. Richard. When you look at the survey, what are your thoughts? Are you in agreement? Is there something that should have been here that is not here? What are your thoughts before we get into?
Okay, good morning, everyone, and thank you for having me. I would say we thank God for bringing us to the end of year 2002 gracefully, and it's our hope that 2023 will be better. So when I took a look at the survey, I agree with it completely, especially for the one that topped number 1. You know that as assurance people, as assurance risk managers, we usually will concern ourselves with the triad of the threat of people, process, and systems. And if you look at them from that perspective, the threat from people is usually the highest. So I am in complete agreement with what the survey says, and even the other ones that showed up there. I think that the survey is a true reflection of what we have seen in 2023. So I'm in complete agreement with that.
Okay, interesting. So for when you look at people risk, for instance, there are multi dimensions of people risk, which organizations basically face. For the sake of time, we have narrowed down people risk to just two of these dimensions. So we're looking at people risk today from the perspective of people being the weakest link, which Mr. Richard has just alluded to, being the weakest link in cybersecurity. And then the big issue, which is the global tech talent shortage occasioned by COVID-19, right? Alex, in a recent survey by Deloitte, it suggests that 80% of internal threats are caused by either employee negligence or human error. What can institutions do to minimize risks posed by human errors?
Okay, first of all, good morning, everyone, and thanks for having me. I heard Mr. Bello thanking God for 2022, but I particularly want to thank God for 2020 because that was the day that managing risks, I would imagine that any risk manager or any tech risk manager that was active in 2020 and now has gray hairs, I would imagine that that was the year that most of those gray hairs were grown. Yes, coming to the question. Well, I mean, awareness. There are no two ways about it, right? Now, yes, we agree that people are the weakest link in cybersecurity management, in risk management. However, if I'm bringing it down home to our local environment, I would also not leave it at just awareness. I will scale it up a bit to organizations taking interest in people because they're the most unpredictable. The person that was top of his game yesterday goes home and is not psychologically okay. He has to come to work the following morning, and then he's already beaten down psychologically. Whether we like it or not, the attackers understand these things, and these are the things that they profile and capitalize upon. So yes, awareness. I was looking at a survey today is 31st December 2022. So that survey is just good. I was reading it last week, and it says that 82% of the breaches that happened in 2022 as at the release of that report last week were caused by people-related issues, 82%. And I think that agrees with what Tony just mentioned about Deloitte. So the reality is, what should we do? We need to keep our people comfortable. We need to see the fact that as organizations, where the people spend most of their time must be a place of succor for them. They should be excited coming to work. We should start to look at people as integral to our businesses. However, we say it, we mouth it, people are our greatest assets, but we act it. I mean, leaders, supervisors, bosses should begin to become emotionally intelligent managers so that it is somebody that is psychologically okay that will remember what he's aware of or what she's aware of. Otherwise, you just have a rack of people that are vulnerable because they're just absent-minded, thinking of other problems at work. Let me leave it at that.
Okay, interesting.
By the way, sorry, Tony, let me make this point that my points are most likely going to be a balance of business realities and technology, because information security these days, you see, the psychology of it is what wins. in the cyber security, in the cyber security economy.
Mm.
So that is what if you want to catch a thief, right? We need to start thinking what they're thinking and then plug the holes. Yeah.
So what I hear you say here is training is important, and then people management is key in
Absolutely.
in managing this risk.
Absolutely.
Interesting. Okay, so the global tech market is suffering from severe shortage of local IT professionals, and it's not just peculiar to any economy. A few months ago, there was this report that suggested that 70% of employers in the US were struggling to fill vacancies, and IT roles were practically the hardest to fill. Right now, this story is the same in Europe, is the same in the UK, and even back home in Nigeria. The percentages may even be worse, right, in some local economies. Now, getting good tech talents today has become a nightmare. There's this phrase that managers dread, right, within the Nigerian labor market, for instance, when your staff comes or just tells you, boss, please, I want to see you, or boss, please, I want to tell you something. You know, there's you can almost be sure that 90% of the time when you hear that phrase, the staff is about resigning, right? So Mr. Richard, what in your opinion are the drivers of global tech talent shortages?
Okay, thank you very much. For me, I think what we are seeing happening is, I'll call it the drumbeat of digital transformation. So across board, every sphere of human endeavor now deploy technology. And this was made, it was accelerated by the pandemic, where people who were, more or less doing some manual work prior to then have decided to automate, we now work remotely and all that. And this is happening across the world. So, and the pace at which this transformation is happening is not commensurate with the pace at which people are being trained, or we are bringing up people with the required skills to tackle this. That's on the global scale. But if we bring it back home, ours is actually being made worse. It's been made worse by what we now see happening that we call the jackpot syndrome, where beyond the fact that we don't have enough of these people already, a number of them are still living. They are living because of our current economic, security, and political climate that has not been, quite favorable. We saw what happened some months ago, or was it a month or two ago, where the dollar skyrocketed to almost 900 naira, wherein whatever salary you get now is almost next to nothing. So people are no longer feeling that there is enough future for them here. So most of these people, and because their demand out there on the global arena is high, they found those opportunities and they are living. The ones that are not even living are right here working remotely. So it's like everybody wants you, so why not? So these are the things I think is driving the global tech talent shortage. And I think that for Nigeria, looking at 2023, for Nigeria, it is going to continue. But whether it will get worse or not will be determined by what the climate of 2023. Of course, we are looking forward to a new government. A new government will come, and then depending on the perception of the people about the new government will determine whether people will think they have a future here or not. And that will matter whether you will get, it get worse or not. So for me, in a nutshell, is the global digital transformation that is driving the trend across the globe. For Nigeria, it's been made worse because of our environment. So our environment has not really helped us at all. I will leave it at that for now.
Interesting. And I agree with you. Recently I saw a travel agency, right? A local travel agency shopping for IT auditors, a travel agency. Just think of that. So everybody is digitizing, right? And so if you're looking to enhance operational efficiency, if you're looking to scale your business operations, you're likely going to leverage tech. Leveraging tech also means that you will have to embrace some of the risks that come with tech, right? So yes, I agree with you completely. So I'll come to you now, Mrs. Bendega. I know this because we have a global audience. Our audience cuts across different countries where we're not just speaking to Nigeria. Do you expect this tech talent shortage to continue in 2023? And if you do, what, in your opinion, are short-term and long-term measures to dealing with this issue?
Okay, thank you for the question. Thank you, everyone. Good morning, and I'm appreciative of the fact that I've been invited to be one of the panelists to speak, to see great minds and great friends, and then former colleagues and all that. Alex, it's nice to see you. So nice. Okay, so will the trend continue? Definitely yes. And I also think that it will get worse.
Wow.
It sure will get worse. And let me just add one more reason to what Mr. Richards said. Now, the pandemic brought about a total change to work structure. What we didn't think was possible 5 years ago is now happening, and it will continue to be. In fact, I remember very well that we are all in this industry together. We are suffering the same tech talent gap issue. So we had given an offer, and everything had been completed. He had accepted. When he got another job, and that job gave him total remote, he turned down our offer and accepted that. The fact that people can work remotely means I can be anywhere across the globe and be working. I have colleagues who are currently in the UK with their families, and they're still working with their Nigerian companies. They've not resigned. So you can work from anywhere. So it makes it easier. Now there are opportunities to also freelance. Why do I want to tie myself down to one job when I can do 2, 3, 4 jobs? And I can decide when I want to go. I can decide I want to go and stay 3 months in the Bahamas and just enjoy myself and not do any other thing. So these opportunities are there. And for even younger people, work hard, play hard, at your own time. Not someone will tell you this is how it should be done. So what should organization do at this time? Long-term, short-term, long-term. Organization must be deliberate in growing tech talent, deliberate actions. There must be strategies in place for IT staff retention. And I'm not talking about somebody just putting up a document, something that is actionable and it is impressive, actionable and impressive. There are organizations today that have IT retention strategy, but if you look at the content, you wonder, who are you actually trying to retain with this? So I'm talking of a proper IT retention strategy that will be actionable and impressive, so that somebody will look at and say, oh, this is nice. For instance, there are organizations today offering company equity to staff. They say, okay, if you stay with us for so length of time, we'll give you this percentage as an incentive. You look at it and say, okay, even when I have stopped working, this one will continue to bring in something for me. So it's impressive. There are, retention, clear career path for tech people. For instance, my organization has between the entry level and the final level, I think it's 13 steps. For IT, they have compressed it to 7 to say, okay, if you are on the IT career path, and that's IT and IT related roles, yours will be 7, meaning that you will move faster. So there are things you can think about and say, okay, if I look at this, I don't have to do every 2 years or every 3 years to be promoted. Mine can be faster based on this. There are other, apart from company equity, there are other things like performance bonus that organization can use and say, okay, for IT, we do it for some departments and say, oh, for this department, if we are paying somebody a amount as bonus, we will pay those of you in this role B amount. Maybe it's twice that or thrice that. They need to start to look at that for IT too. So you say, okay, at the end of the year, if I'm here till end of the year, I'm going to get this amount more than my contemporaries. Okay, so the other non-monetary strategies, holiday payments, trading opportunities, but companies must be deliberate in growing tech talent. Thank you.
Tony, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Just to add to what Mrs. Oluremi said as well, in this part of the world, we've started building our business models to align with current trends, right? So we know that the Western world already have started digitizing long even before other countries, or let me put it that way. But the level of digitalization has been so rapid that there's no discipline you call out there, whether it being a lawyer, a doctor, an architect, whatever. You have to have a form of computer literacy, right? So very soon, online or physical presence in terms of you having to see somebody physically will be very expensive. In fact, you pay serious money to see somebody live in front of you. So we have to try to see how we can build our business models to align with the current trend. We know that yes, at some point, this is going to be the new normal. Our work policies have changed across the industries to either completely remote or hybrid. You hardly see organizations that have on-site work policy now in Europe, right? It's either hybrid or completely remote. So again, contending with talent is now not even with on-site work environment, is now with hybrid work environment and completely remote. You see that we are literally shifting from that brick and mortar. My organization, for example, used to have big buildings here and there. We are saving costs in terms of nobody comes to this office anymore, right? Those are now, should I say, waste of if it was part of the strategy to have brick and mortar and have presence everywhere. No, you have to see how you can now start making awareness or making your company or known digitally, not by saying you have brick and mortar somewhere and all that. So growing and scaling your models to align with the current trend is always very, very necessary.
Interesting. Thank you for that insight. So and thank you, Mrs. Oluremi. So you see that in dealing with people risks, there are a plethora of initiatives. There's no silver bullet that kills it, right? There are several. From what we've heard, the faculties say, right, that there are different things from people management to welfare of staff to changing strategy in operations, right? There are several things that organizations need to start considering if they are to retain their people. Okay, let's leave people risk and move to third-party risks. It turns out to be one of the critical risks that shaped our 2022. And again, largely due to the fact that organizations can't handle every part of their operations themselves. So as organizations continue to digitize, as they continue to enable connections amongst themselves, there will always be that need to leverage third parties. In 2013, there was this hack on Target. I don't know if we keep up with these trends. It's still fresh in my memory because the hackers were able to come through a third-party HVAC vendor, a cooling. These guys were involved in cooling and all that. The impact of that hack was ridiculous. Over 40 million credit cards and debit cards were stolen. 70 million customer records were stolen. Bring it back home. 5 years ago, there was a bank that lost $30 million to weak third-party relationships. Unfortunately, it feels like institutions are not even learning from these experience. And so, Anthony, I'm going to come back to you. I'm going to come to you now. What measures can institutions put in place to better manage third-party risk? And I'm saying this beyond just having documented contracts in place, because again, I see there are institutions who just feel that because I have a service level agreement or a contract in place with the vendor, then, well, I'm fine. We already have a confidentiality clause. What can institutions do better to manage this risk going into 2023? Because it's not looking like it's something we're going to wish away, right?
Thank you for that question, because again, before couple of years ago, we focused on contract management to say you put key clauses in contract, right, to audit, ensure you tell me that you have an incident 24 hours, maintain a good security posture, all those fancy words. But how do you ensure that these third parties uphold what is even documented in a contract? Because if the chips are down, it's your data example that is compromised. Even if you have all the legal rights to say, yes, I'll sue them, I'll get money from them, your reputation is also at risk as well, right? You hear Uber is compromised. You don't hear the third party that even supported Uber, right?
Sure,
so it's still you that's going to have to bear the brunt. So what do? You monitor. So more like you're doing a third-party risk assessment. You exercise those rights and ensure that those things you put in the contract are actually upheld, right? You perform a third-party risk assessment. In fact, some mature organizations have actually separated third-party risk assessment into different buckets. You have threat risk assessment, you have privacy impact assessment, then you have third-party risk assessment that focuses on that organization as a whole. So you perform this assessment at the point of entry when you have that relationship with that particular third party, and also periodically, depending on the impact that third party is to your organization. So you have your internal third party classification, and you say, okay, this particular third parties are high risk, these ones are medium risk. You focus on the high risk. If you have the bandwidth to focus on the rest, you can focus on the rest. But you do that periodic assessment even after the third party is in your environment. So what do I mean by TRA, threat risk assessment? You're looking at encryption, you're looking at all those fancy controls, privacy, you're looking at all those privacy laws, PII, PHI, is he involved in this transaction? Even regulatory compliance reviews, you'll be looking at things like GDPR, PPPEDA, PCI, are we actually in compliance with this particular regulations, right? And you're looking at the entity itself. Do they have good security posture? Do they maintain, do they do policies and all that? Now, how do you even do a risk assessment in terms of assessing organizations, right? Most of the time you send questionnaires to them to say, explain or demonstrate how you, and provide evidence, right? More like the way you do your normal internal audit, that you're actually following this particular, upholding your good security posture. You're looking at things about privacy, around access control, around network security and all that. Now, for some organizations that are, should I say, cloud-based, right? Service organizations, you'll be asking for things around SOC 2, Service Organization Control Reports, looking at their controls and see how an independent assessor has actually done assess them and see what gaps they have, right? You can look at those kind of reports to see any gaps they have, and of course, I agree with them in terms of remediation strategies. If it's critical that you find a gap, you can take it internally to know, okay, are we going to continue with this vendor or this supplier or not? Now, it's important to know, to call out here that it's not only third party that we're looking at, there's also what we call fourth party, right? So we will call it nexted relationships, right? The third party of your third party is your own fourth party, right? And how do you ensure that your fourth party is also protected? Because it's your right to be sure that, yes, your fourth party is also protected. Most of the time, these fourth parties are not contractually obligated to your organization. Your third party will be contractually obligated to your organization. Your fourth party will necessarily not be contractually obligated to your organization? How do you ensure that your third party actually look out for you in terms of their own third party? You need to ensure that it's put in a contract that any liability that comes from their own third party, that is your third party or any nexted relationship, you are covered. And you also, for example, what I see organizations do is that they ask for independent attestation to say that, show me that you're actually doing a review of your third party. Attest to the fact that your third party is actually being reviewed, right? You provide some form of documentation just to give yourself, put your mind at ease when you are doing your routine periodic check in terms of your third party risk assessment.
Interesting. Tony, you said so many things, right? You've said so many things. What I find interesting, which appears to be a blind spot for most institutions, is those nested relationships, your fourth party relationships. Because when you are documenting your SLA, we usually think that having a contract in place is fine, but those other relationships those fourth party relationship or nested relationships create some level of impact. Should anything go wrong with them, they impact not just that other business, not just the third party, but even your own business. Alex, what are your thoughts around managing third party relationships? At least from a CISO standpoint. I know you'll be dealing with a number of vendors who have connections to your institutions and stuff. Is Alex still?
Yeah, so in my case, it's diverse because I'm confronted by third parties in no less than 8 or 9 different industries who have different behavioral patterns, who are regulated by different regulators, some stringent, some very lax, almost zero regulation. And so the carelessness is rampant. And sometimes when you ask these questions, they just look at you and you're like, oh, okay, sorry, you're from banking. I say, yes, I'm from banking. So the reality is that whatever is not written is not said. So first of all, you need to ensure that everybody executes a commitment to managing risk. I was happy when Tony mentioned the fine letters of right of audits, limitations to use, and all those transfer of data, location of data, and all of that. Yeah, because they are fine, beautiful letters. But like he said, if you do not activate them and execute them in reality, then you're joking because you're waiting to be a curer rather than a preventer. In the case of, take for instance, it is only when the risk crystallizes that you're going to be suing, you're going to be going to court, you're going to be claiming damages and all of that. But there's actually no amount of damage you can claim that can repair the damage that has been done. Because the damage that may have been done by risk crystallizing is present damage and future damage. It will take you a whole lot more to use money to repair your image in the face of your customers and consumers when a risk crystallizes. So how do we do this? If you come to my space as a regulator and you see my contract has all these third-party risk management clauses, and you are not asking for proof that I have used them in the course of the year to ensure that I'm protected from the risks that my third parties bring to me, and you allow me to go scot-free, I'm not likely to take you serious as somebody that has come for my business assurance. So what I do, or what I would rather do, is to be my own auditor in that sphere. Because I know that I am not making my life easier by letting those things go. In any case, like I said, I work in a space that is multifaceted. So I am actually a third party to some organizations. So I am helped by the fact that these organizations come anytime they feel like, according to contract, to come and execute the clauses that manages me as a third party, right? So as to ensure that I do not bring risk to them. So even if I was going to forget, I remember that, okay, what somebody does to me that pinches me and adds to my work or is my obligation, hey, let's go and do it to the other people. And that's how the whole estate is protected. Because in reality, one of the things that I insist upon explaining to my third parties when signing those clauses is that, hey, we will come. Please note that it is dependent, the continuation of this relationship depends on the amount of cooperation that you give us in executing these clauses. We're not just signing them. So organizations need to be very serious and not just include those clauses in contract just for the cosmetic reality of it, but the fact that there are clauses that consultants have developed across boards to protect even the third party, him or herself. Right? So these are realities. And the more we move into action, living, talk, and theory, the more protected we are. Because after the talk and theory, action is next. If you do not do the talk and theory, you may not act because you have pushback. But immediately after action, talk and theory, move into action. Let it start. You sign a contract today, first 3 months after, you want to go and check something. You don't necessarily need to have a trigger. Just trigger yourself and just give them notice you want to come and check this, just routine check and all of that. That's what I think.
Okay, fantastic.
Just to add something to that, Tony, to what Alex just said about execution. When your third party, your fourth party, your nth party, when they actually know, well, your third party basically, because they are the ones that you sign the agreement with, when they know that you will execute it, they are more careful with you. And I want to give an example. Something happened within our organization, and the bank suffered some losses as a result of what a third party failed to do. It was a personalization company. And then we had a meeting, and the bank said, okay, this is what happened, we'll correct it and all of this. Thank you very much for the correction. But after the correction, the terms of the SLA says that there's a penalty to be paid. This penalty must be paid. It's not just the cost of doing business today. It's not just the reputational damage of today. There is business to be done tomorrow. So the person you have affected, his word of mouth will affect our businesses tomorrow. As a result of that, this must be done. When we did that, the guy sat up. Subsequently, human beings, normally, when we know that we are being measured and we are being punished or rewarded for what we do or fail to do, we are more careful. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Anthony, just before you go ahead, Anthony, I think I recognize you now. I've been trying to place your face and where we have worked together before now, and I recognize you. It's your job, it's your assignment to go and recognize me too.
Interesting. So I think the insights are great. What I hear from this conversation is that one, third-party risks are not going away. Two is that institutions need to be proactive, right? We need to step up monitoring. And three, we need to walk the talk. If we have a contract, we need to follow it through. There's a bit around ensuring that your risk assessment is quite granular, which was what Anthony was alluding to initially, from your risk assessment, identifying the services that the vendor is providing you, ranking your third parties in terms of high risk, low risk, or medium risk based on the impact their operations could have on your business, etc. Interesting comments on the chat. Charles is saying that, so just like customer service is everyone's role, risk management is fast becoming everyone's role too, and I agree totally. Debola is saying that fourth party, interesting, they have been neglected over time. Thank you for the perspectives. And Jubril is saying that risk management is actually every operator's business. It is built into every job, process, and function. As a processor, you should be able to identify those risks in your job function. Fantastic, fantastic. If you have any questions, please, now is the time. Please put them in the chat box, and we'll, as much as possible, try to deal. We are fast running out of time. We'll need to speed up things because we still have a couple of risks to look at before we wrap up for the day. Just last week, the owners, Meta, the owners of Facebook, they agreed to pay a whopping $725 million in fines as settlement for a class action suit over Cambridge Analytica harvesting data from Facebook users. I don't know if you guys remember that issue. It was in the lead up to the Trump elections. Nation states have also, right, they've deliberately tried to develop domestic data privacy laws, and the idea is just to standardize how organizations handle data, right? Today, data, they call it the new oil. Some call it life, and it's collected everywhere, from your organization to your places of worship to, you know, everybody's just asking for one thing or the other. And I'll be coming to you, Mr. Richard. What strategies can organizations adopt to in 2023 to better manage data privacy risks? Because it is a concern. It is a concern, a major concern. And that discipline around collecting of data, it has not really been imbibed by most institutions. There are concepts like data minimization. There are concepts like, there are concepts like ensuring that what you collect data for is what you actually need it for. You know, I don't know how much these have helped, but what can institutions do? What strategies can we deploy in 2023 to effectively manage risk posed by data privacy? Because the fines are likely going to come if there are breaches.
Okay, thank you very much, Tony. You've stated it already that data is now the gold, is the new gold. And to make matters worse, data itself has become ubiquitous. Ubiquitous in the sense that, unlike those days where you have your perimeter network security, protecting your data and all of that, today, your data is in the cloud. It's you access it from your mobile, you access it from everywhere. So data has actually become so fluid that the access points are no longer the way it was before. So you are expected, one is expected, organizations are expected to be very deliberate about strategies that they adopt to manage their data. And as we've always said, number one, I would recommend is education. People have to be aware of the value of data, the protection it's required, the protection we should afford data. So your employees must know, understand the reason why you are protecting data. So that for me is very key. And then there are a number of other measures we are, organizations are expected to adopt. I would say you should also adopt a data-centric approach to security, layering on defense in depth, which we're all familiar with. Because today, given the fact that you can access your data from everywhere, if you put that into consideration as you define your security controls, that too will go a very long way. And because we've also all now adopted cloud, you have to lock down your data in the cloud. The technicalities of how you do that is left for each company to adopt. Sorry, you may be hearing some noise at the background. I think they are doing construction beside me here. Sorry about that.
It's fine.
So for me, your data in the cloud, lock it down. If it is practically possible, deploy encryption. That's on the technical side of it. And then organizations need to implement multi-factor authentication. That is key. Gone were the days that we all rely on use of password, usernames, and all that. That will not work today. That will protect your data. And then you need to be deliberate about the permissions you grant on your cloud facility. Again, we know that most of these vulnerabilities most of the access breaches are exploitation of vulnerabilities. So you have to be deliberate about your patch management, be vigilant about it. You really have to monitor your IT, because we know that it's not practically possible for an IT organization to keep up with the requirement for patching, new ones coming in every day. So there has to be a deliberate effort in monitoring how these patches and vulnerabilities are remedied. Because again, we talked about human error earlier. A lot of these breaches would either be coming from error in configuration, human error and all that, but far and beyond human error is the one that are done deliberately, which circles us back to the human factor. So who do you have? Who are the people manning your infrastructure? Your employees. So this speaks again to their integrity, because you never can tell. Your employees may be working with some other cartels outside, granting whatever access, disguising it as though it is an error. So all of these things are what you should put in perspective. So for me, education is key. People should know why they're protecting data. The necessary policies, procedures, and all that should be in place. Adopt a data-centric security approach. Implement multi-factor, strict adoption of controls. Need to know access should be granted or need to know least privilege, and all of those controls that we have often talked about in information security. For me, that's the approach organizations should adopt in 2023 to counter the threat of data privacy. Thank you very much.
Interesting. Thank you, Mr. Richard. It's like you covered everything. I don't know if any of the panelists if you have anything to add to that. Mr. Richard kind of touched on several things.
Yeah,
from education.
He did. I just want to add something.
Okay, please.
To it.
Yes.
Okay. I mean, he actually covered them. If you actually look at this survey, people risk covers everything from the people risk itself to poorly documented processes. People risk, every other thing is still people risk. So people risk is almost 100%. As we're looking at now, if you want to look at it, I mean, from that angle. But one other thing I want us to just consider in data privacy issue is monitoring privileged users.
Privileged users, interesting.
Yes, access. We were talking about principle of least privilege. If I don't have access to something, it's unlikely that I would actually use it. But there are people whose normal day-to-day responsibility permits them to have access to this data. What do they do with it? How are you monitoring? Sometimes we just assume that they are going to be good people. Maybe. But in that assumption is something that some people might be good today, tomorrow they might not be good. So we need to monitor. When you start to monitor and to punish, reward system. When I say reward, I'm not talking about in terms of money. Say, if you've done this thing wrong, why did you do this? If there's somebody that is checking and monitoring, say, oh, you dropped this table, you copied this file, why did you do it? So that these people also know, as they're working, they also know that, oh, whatever it is that we do is being monitored. They are more careful, just to add monitoring, a privilege and access monitoring to that. Thank you.
Okay. We are running out of time and we still have a few questions to go. Wow. Okay, we have questions around cloud risk and cybersecurity. I know Mr. Richard touched a bit on cloud risk, but I don't know how much. We need to be able to take questions from the audience, and I see a couple of them in the chat box. So let me except we are able to get more time. I don't know how it's going to. I don't want to keep our panelists beyond the time we have scheduled for this because of other stuff that they may have. But on a final note, before we take questions from the audience, and this will go to Mr. Richard and Mrs. Remy Bendega, except other panelists have something to say. But Mr. Richard first, how satisfied are you with the level of awareness the board and senior management have on cybersecurity? And so we are saying, say on a scale of 1 to 10, 10 being the highest. How satisfied are you?
Okay, thank you very much. I would say that the boards that we have today, they have come a long way, and there's been this talk about IT security for a very long time now. And I think a number of them have catch up on these. I would say on a scale of 1 to 10, I would say 7.
7.
In most board, yes, in most board, I can tell you for free that for the ones I have interacted with, we have people there who are actually very technical people before they got to the C level. So, yeah, before they got to C level, and a number of them are actually very savvy. Some that have done some of our roles prior to becoming, in that top level. So I would say that there is a lot of awareness about cybersecurity in the boards that we have today, especially for boards of institutions that are financially related, the financial system. Their boards are very aware. And I think that for the board, what they should be talking about what they should be focusing on. We know that because of the economic times, the geopolitics that Tony talked about at the time he started, he introduced these, has led to the economic challenges that we see today. And when you have economic challenges, it creates new threat actors. And then there's motivation for people to commit cyber crime. It's even easier now for them to commit cyber crime. You always have criminals everywhere. But before now, you oftentimes have people robbing people on the road, on the team bag and all that. But in cybercrime, they stay in the comfort of their homes and then they harvest from wherever, So for me, the bigger issue would always remain insider threat. We talked about it before, the people threat. It will remain a big issue. And what the board at that level, what they should be worrying about more, I think I'll just put them in three or four bullet points. The first one, I think what they should worry about is that the board should ensure that they should be aware that their institution have a cyber security framework and that it is implemented. They need to know.
Okay. And
I think also that the board should seek to understand the cyber security resilience of their institution.
Okay.
Thirdly, I think they should also be aware of their business continuity preparedness. And lastly, I think the board should demand regular reporting from those who are responsible, CISO or whatever, cyber security breaches. Let them be aware. So for me, I think that is it. Right now, the board, from my own experience, the request for regular meetings with the CISO. They actually have a meeting with the CISO, they present to them. Let them deliberately find out the cybersecurity framework is existing, it is implemented, your cyber resilience, they should be, in a way, in some form, be educated about how resilient the institution is in terms of cybersecurity. How prepared are they for business continuity? Because a number of these threats that we have seen, some of which we've saw in 2022, will still be happening in 2023. Things like insider threat will remain. Social engineering is an issue. People who are managing your system, those who are having your administrators. through social engineering, they can be compromised and access will be let into your organization. Ransomware attack will still be on the increase. I foresee that will continue. And then the talent issue compounds it. Now you are having all of these threats, and the people who you are expected to use to man them are not readily available. So these are all the threats that I see and what I think the board should concern themselves about going forward to 2023. Thank you very much.
Okay. My dear panelists, can I plead for an extra 15 minutes? We're out of time before I ask the participants if we can do an extra 15 minutes just to cover a number of questions. I plead with you. Participants, are we fine? Can we do an extra 15 minutes? Maybe you just type a yes in the chat box. Let's try and be democratic. Can we do an extra 15 minutes? Okay, fantastic. Okay, so Mrs. Bendaga, do you want to take a stab at that question? What should be the focus of the board and senior management in 2023? And how well do you, I know Alex is also a CISO, and I'll need to know his own numbers in terms of the level of awareness of the board when it comes to cybersecurity.
Okay.
So
2023 is going to be an interesting year. About 70 countries will be having election in 2023.
Wow.
And that's massive. Wow. And you know, every election year for a country is significant because of cyber attacks. You know that there are nations who are just sympathetic to another nation that will start to do something. You remember what happened when Trump was going to become president for that election. It's still very fresh in our memories. So we're good, and it's going to increase. It's going to increase. So, I mean, today's board, Mr. Richard is actually a very generous man. I would like to have him as a lecturer. I would like to have him mark my skills. You know, but today's board is actually more interested. They don't have any choice anyway, because the budget to maintain IT, to secure IT today is huge, and they have to sign off. It's not something that executive management will say. I mean, these are things that are going in some organizations, millions and billions. It's not easy, so they have to sign. And when they are signing off such things, they themselves, they are holding executive management more responsible. You see CISOs coming to make presentations at board meetings. You know, they want to hear. Now, I've not seen board being more demanding about cybersecurity issues as they are now. For instance, in my organization, the board has told us every board meeting, we want to see every outstanding high-risk issues on cybersecurity and tell us who is responsible so that we can hold that person. They are demanding accountability. They're saying, what is it that you need? What has not happened? We want to see this one. They will ask the CAE to come out. Now, let the MD stand, tell us what we need to do. So they are demanding a lot more. And that's putting everybody on the toes, which is actually good. But, you know, I think we're looking at it as the board of the bigger organizations. They don't have any choice. So if, for those ones, fine, but there are still some smaller companies whose board need to step up to do.
So if you were to rank?
If I were to rank, that is ranking everybody together. Maybe for fear of Mr. Richard, I would say 6 over 10.
Lord have mercy.
Alex, your score, before we take questions from the audience, your score in terms of board awareness. Over 10, on the scale of 1 to 10.
So now I have a problem. Between
don't have a problem.
Between being seen as generous. I think I'll do a 7.
A 7. Anthony, what score?
I'll do a 7 because, again, even higher than that in this part of the world, because you see that the attacks you hear are more of I would say foreign attacks, right? So everyone is getting agitated in terms of who is next, right? You see indices that says every company will be attacked at least once in his lifetime. So you're saying, when is it going to be my turn, right? So the board is seeing this, it's just to sign up that ticket to say, can I make this investment? Is it the right time to make this investment? Who is accountable to ensure that this investment is rightly spent is now the issue.
Okay.
And let me just quickly add, they cannot but be interested now because security leaders, CISOs, IT leaders, auditors, IT auditors, and all of that have found the fact that you need to make them understand that the bottom line that they are chasing is what is at risk, not your own job and function. So if with 2 or 3 clicks, you can lose $1 billion, and the target for that year is $1.2 billion, and you think you are making it, you don't want to lose it. However, if you invest $100 million out of the 1.2 that you are chasing to retain the 1.1 that will be left of your target, rather than leave it open for just 3 clicks, that is paid for with peanuts, because the cybercrime economy is a very cheap economy.
Oh, sure.
Then you question your years of experience if we can't balance what to be interested in.
Okay, thank you. So if you look at from our survey too, we try to push out to just get a sense of what our participants were thinking will be the 2023 IT risks that will dominate the space. You'll see that just like the panelists have shared, people risk is still coming out tops, cloud security is still coming out tops. You still have third-party risk and cybersecurity risk and privacy risk. They are still coming out tops, meaning that these guys are not going anywhere. Mrs. Bendega, we have a question from Stephen. I know you spoke a bit on incentives. In 20 seconds, can you, Stephen is saying, while incentive packages to attract, grow, and retain tech talents have become a business exigency, we are starting to see pockets of resentment from non-IT staff rising from this unavoidable preferential treatment given to obviously given to IT staff, right? Now, given that disgruntled people are the weakest link in any deployment or in any organization, I like to think that's what he's saying. What will this strategy not backfire going forward? So he's saying here that, look, so we are talking about retaining tech talent, treating them nice, giving them stock options, bonuses, allowing them work from home. What of the folks in finance? What of the guy in credit? What of the guy in admin, right? He knows that he's the weakest link and he's getting disgruntled. What's wrong with this? Why this preferential treatment? I've seen a couple of non-tech folk who are moving into tech largely because of some of these perks, right? I'm unapologetic about it anyway, because I remember when accountants held the employment space down, right? If you were not a chartered accountant, you were probably a leper. You were like a leper, right? And that tide has turned. But seriously now, I think Stephen's concerns are germane. What can institutions do? Will this strategy not backfire?
It's about value. Now, like you said, turn by turn PLC. Every profession has its own turn. This is actually the turn of the tech people, and this is not what is happening only in Nigeria. It happens in different parts of the world. That there are some people, even when it comes to bonuses, everybody does not get the same thing. It happens. It's an organizational thing, and whether somebody will be disgruntled or not, it will still happen. So if anybody will bother, so it's about what value. Before, IT used to be an enabler. IT used to be a cost center. It's no longer like that. Now IT is seen as the organizations. Our MD 1st of January came to us and said, this is an IT company. That's the truth. If you don't retain
offering
them,
financial services.
offering financial services. This is an IT company offering financial services. The rule of the game has changed. In a dispatch riding company, I mean, okay, maybe a place like Uber or Bolt, who is the most important person? They are the drivers. So every organization has to determine which are my key talents and how to retain them. As for being disgruntled, people will be disgruntled. You can't please them.
In fact, hasn't IT people been disgruntled for decades?
Thank you, my dear. When accountants have their time. So I mean,
just to chip in there. See, Remy, you mentioned Uber that the driver is the most valuable. I do not agree. It's the IT people. Uber themselves don't even want drivers.
No, what I'm saying about that is that the IT people, yes, they have a way. You know, for the IT people, actually somebody very close to me works with one of those companies. Their own salary is different. They are not even on the salary scale of that. But when you talk about operations, yes, when you talk about operations, without the drivers, they won't make the money.
I agree. I'm just joking. But like the person observed there, is actually creating another risk. If you have in your organization people who are disgruntled because somebody else is earning more than them and they're on the same grade, you already create another risk entirely. And you know, humans are rational beings. You have, you know, we're all familiar with the fraud triangle where you have opportunity, we have what's the other one now? Rationalization, opportunity, and what's the third one? I can't remember. All of you here are tech people. See, you cannot control the man who is rationalizing something. And then that eventually will lead him to do something that is inimical to the organization. So somehow, organization need to look at it critically, how they will manage that side. Perhaps the IT people in maybe where and manner they employ them, they should not be employed. They should have a separate kind of grading system that is different from the other people. Because if you have all of us graded as the same, for example, as you have grades in a bank, you say somebody is a BO. If I'm a BO and the other person is a BO and the other person is any more than me, I certainly will be disgruntled. So there has to be a strategic approach to it, whereby people don't begin to see them as they are on the same level. By the time they are not seeing themselves as the same level, it's easier for them not to start thinking that they are being cheated. Just to cheat that.
I think these nuances, I was going to come to you, Anthony, because you provide an international perspective to this conversation. These nuances may just be local, right? So Anthony, just in 20 seconds, please, so that we can take at least 3 more questions.
Internationally, we don't have so-called grading system, right? So again, you don't say everybody is on particular grade, everybody's on particular grade. No. You negotiate your salaries as you come into an organization, right? So you can't say somebody's any more than me, I'm any more than a person. No, that's what you negotiated when you came in. And if you want to get an increment or a raise, you also negotiate with your director and supervisor. So that nuance of saying, yes, we know that the tech guys earn more, but you should actually place an amount to the value you bring to the table. Right? And if you feel that the organization is not paying you well for that value you bring to the table, you are free to jump ship, right? I think, and again, there are some policies around disclosing your income, because again, we don't know, there's no one grade fit all. So you can't say because in Nigeria to say a BO should earn X amount of Naira, right? There's no grading system as such to say BO. It's all names, right? Say security consultant, security, whatever thing is out there. So you don't even know what levels and what levels. So you are in limbo, and there are policies around you divulging your pay package to the next person around there as well. But because back maybe in Nigeria, you have everybody knows this is a flat. You don't even need to divulge. We already know. Yet you don't know what the person is earning. There are policies around divulging your pay package to another person, and you negotiate your income as you enter. If you want a raise, you discuss with your line manager. So that limbo is kind of resolved in that manner.
Great.
And I think, in Nigeria, organizations should now start to be honest with themselves and how they quantificate people as their greatest assets only in words, and actually put it in action. I see that happening already in a few places, such that you don't give your staff the impression that you are doing them a favor, giving them a job. It's a mutually benefiting relationship. So as they are trying to work hard to keep the job, you're also trying to work hard to keep them. So they see value in being members of your staff. And then you demand value for them to be your employee. That balances everything to the extent that for somebody to be disgruntled that some people that are becoming scarce are now being treated specially, that person must have a little bit of greed, yeah, and just envy, which psychological engagement can cure, so that the disgruntledness is actually not justified, because on the baseline, everybody is treated with the impression that they are valued. And then everybody now understands that we will lose this company that we love so much if we cannot retain this set of people. Some time ago in banking, and I imagine up to recently, if he has even been, that's if he has gone off completely. The reality was that if you are a market-facing staff, in fact, if I'm a marketer, because customer service was market-facing, right? And they were not treated the way the marketers were treated. The explanation then was that the marketers were the one bringing the money. I was in core IT operations, and I used to ask a question: you bring in the check, does that check turn to money if the banking application is not there to process it?
Alex, okay, I agree with you. Let's take this question from Justus, right? And Anthony, I just need you to take just 20 minutes. He says here that while we agree that remote work has come to stay and organizations do not offer remote or hybrid opportunities, okay, organizations that do not offer remote or hybrid opportunities stand the risk of losing good hands to those that do. Again, we have seen cases where organizations find it difficult to prosecute cases because the suspects resides in a different geographical zone with different laws. Does this not pose a challenge to remote work? Should organizations consider these remote work opportunities? I think what Justice is saying here is, can I be in Nigeria and hire my staff sitting in the UK or sitting in Canada or sitting in Sierra Leone, right, while he's doing my job for me? Are there concerns around jurisdictions, maybe where the staff misbehaves? You know, if he's in your local environment, you can just use the cops to pick the guy up. But what if he's sitting in a different jurisdiction? How does that impact organizations remote wise? So 20 seconds, Tony, please.
That again is another maturity level that we are trying to attain. For now, the maturity level is working remote locally within your environment, right? Saying working remote within maybe Americas or within your country. But that cross-country, should I say, remote work is still being considered in a very sparring manner, right? So that maturity, we've not really gotten there yet. Organizations are still looking at the legal implications or the laws applicable to each jurisdiction before they can do that. The people that actually exercise those kind of options for now are mostly tilting towards consulting. But again, you need to understand that that value is not in that local jurisdiction, and you have to now say you want to exercise the laws of that other country you're using. So it's a bit complicated, and we are slowly getting to that. But for now, it's still sparingly, it still happens sparingly. Maybe you do it on, it's still happening sparingly, but people do it secretly, right? But saying organizations are aware about this particular kind of practice is still sparing. We don't, it has not come with full-blown maturity yet.
Okay, okay. Finally, Mr. Richard, do you think, what place do you see outsourcing? What role do you think outsourcing plays in managing this global tech shortage? Say, for instance, services, hiring third parties to do your IT auditing, IT control, or even your cybersecurity. what role do you think outsourcing can play in bridging that gap? You're muted, sir.
Thank you, Tony. It's already playing that role. It's one of the options for addressing the global tech challenge. For the big tech, out there, they're already using these as one of the ways they outsource certain kinds of tasks to companies, to consulting firms to execute for them. I think it's a very good way to go, but you have to have your structure around it, develop a good strategy, develop your agreements and all of that, appropriate risk management practices to be able to take advantage of this. But I think it's one of the ways. Today we have people doing freelancing. You have, for example, you have something you need to develop for, especially in the area of application development. We have a lot of companies around that are doing that. And even here in Nigeria, a number of companies are already doing it. Even in my own company, we are doing it. We have a number of companies that are, application development companies that we outsource to. So I think it's one practical way to address the current talent challenge, to outsource certain kind of specialized tasks to certain firms, and then they execute for you. So for me, it's working already.
Thank you. Thank you very much, my dear panelists. You have been awesome and fantastic. We really do appreciate your time. I also want to thank our participants for attending. We appreciate you guys. I think we can take one more question live from the participants, just in case there is anybody who wants to say something from the participants now. A comment, a question. I saw a comment from Abdul Rahim. He says his key takeaways from this session is that emotionally intelligent leaders are important. Appropriate management of third and fourth party risk are key. Better data protection by enforcing monitoring of privileged users are also important. Anybody from the audience? If there is none, okay, I don't see any hands raised. Then, Sheyi, maybe I'll just call on you to wrap things up. Thank you very much, participants, and Happy New Year in advance. Sheyi?
Yeah, fantastic. My own good afternoon to everyone, because I had to wait to the last to address everyone. To the participants, I was trying to, excuse me, have an average of years of experience, and adding Tony's own to it by spying his profile on LinkedIn, it's equal to about 100 years altogether. So I want to say a big thank you for coming, Anthony, Mr. Richard, Madam Remy Bendiga. Good to see you once again, and my brother Alex. Good to see you again from the west side. Thank you for coming, everyone. Who are we? We are Cyber Tech Assurance team. We rise by lifting others. On the slide tray, please, can you go to the next slide tray, please? Effect. On the slide tray, here is our WhatsApp group. We'll be dropping it on the chat group here. Just click on it and you'll be there. On this WhatsApp group and the link forum, what we do is we share knowledge. We do, we bring up your questions. We sort a lot of questions. Any audit area, any unveiling on trending area, we discuss. This is where we find ourselves, and we do all this free because we see the need and the hunger in the world, and this is the only way we can add our own value. How else do we add value? Coming from next month, this is just a good way of wrapping the year, because every month or every other month, bi-monthly, once in 2 months at times, because of availability, we have this free gathering where we educate ourselves on unveiling on trending audit areas, and we've been doing that. In January, just watch out. We will be looking at integration of the difference between DevOps and DevSecOps. Auditing a development operations environment and the need for security to be embedded is what we'll be looking at in January. So, and it's going to be free. It's going to be an hour 30-minute session where we'll dive into what it's common around the industry, be it FMCG, be it banking, whatever integration with all the risks that we've talked about today. What is going on around CI/CD pipelines and all that? I'll be looking at that in January. And on this same link that we have here is where we'll be telling you, giving you updates around that meeting. So just make yourself available anytime and ask your questions on those links. On this note, without taking much of our time, I want to say thank you once again, and we will continue to rise by lifting orders. So bring up your questions, and the ones that we can't answer because we are not an island of knowledge. Thank God we have experience like Madam Remy Bendiga of over 20 years and the likes in the team. So we'll always route all our questions to even senior colleagues. Thanks, guys, and we will see you again.
Thank you.
Keep it a day with us. Thank you and happy New Year.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Happy New Year.
Thank you.